Hi everyone and welcome back to ONM Insight. My name is Soreti Kadia and I'm your host. And before we begin today's program, we have a small announcement to play.
Ashama kun sagale bridge reality gare Samuel Birhanuti manni jirenya ala namaaf ni barbaachisa inni kun garuu jireenya tulbu hore yaada nama boqochiisa gaaddisa aargal fitee jiraachuuf nama sassachiisa marree isinis kana bitachuu yoo fitan akkasumas kan ofi qabdan gurgurtanii bu'a qabeessa ta'uun gara xiqqaatti yookaan gara guddaatti jijjiirrachuu yoo barbaaddan dafaa mariisisa bridge reality toora bilbila keenya torba ja'a sadii torba afur sadii ja'a lamarratti nuuf bilbila bridge reality garee Samuel Birhanuti.
For today's program, we have the pleasure of being joined by journalist Shakoor Nyaketo to discuss the ongoing war in Sudan. Shakoor is also the founder of Journal Lingual Press, an East African press and media service provider based in Sudan, who offer media and journalism services for local, regional and international companies, agencies or other media firms in East Africa, in the East African region and the African continent at large. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today, Shakoor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Soreti.
Shakoor, Al Jazeera reported just 2 days ago, actually, on the 31st of May, that the latest attempt to stop the fighting between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, suffered a major setback as the Sudanese army suspended talks that have been going on since about the beginning of May. Those seem to have been on and off. It has now been 7 weeks since the beginning of the war, and according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, 1,800 people have been killed and an incredible number, just a very large number, 1.6 million people have been displaced since the beginning of the war. Now, you and your family made the decision to escape Sudan because of this conflict. Can you tell me about the Sudan that you lived in and knew in comparison to the Sudan that you had to make the decision to leave?
Well, you know, Sudan before the war was actually a very good country. It's the country where I was born, raised and lived and worked and have family and everything. I had a lot of things, a lot of memories. Well, Sudan is one of the very important countries in the East North Africa, the Middle East, and also in the continent in terms of, economy, in terms of everything. So Sudan was a very great country, although we had a revolution, and we are coming back after ousting the previous regime to build a new country where people are, struggling to rebuild Sudan after 30 years. Suddenly we come into a war that today we are forced to leave.
Yeah, this process of, as you described in your words, of rebuilding the country after this revolution, what does that look like at a grassroots level? Like, how are people organizing? What kinds of, just give us a picture of this rebuilding process that was taking place after this revolution.
The rebuilding process was to rebuild Sudan, not the way it was, in a new in a new picture, not only rebuilding the country, but reintroducing Sudan into what it's supposed to be, not how it was. And the people at the grassroots level was working very hard. Everybody was actually, working to build the country. Although we struggled over the last 4 years, we had a troubling transitional period, which the politicians could not reach to an end. But that is, the post revolution. Every revolution has to take some time to bring a change. So Sudanese were excited for the revolution. They were hopeful and they were ready to build the country. And most of them, they were working very hard to build the country. So we will not actually measure the success of revolution by politicians' point of view. We actually measure the success of the revolution by the people. When the people are ready to build a new country, that's when we say the revolution was successful. It was successful, but there are some challenges has faced the country.
Yeah. So in terms of, I really like what you're saying here about the measure of a revolution, or the success of a revolution cannot be measured by politicians, rather it's by people. What were the political outcomes that community were looking for in terms of repositioning the Sudanese army or the RSF or generally any political leadership in the country in the vision of this new Sudan they were building? Were they wanting to go to elections whereby even the Sudanese people from the Sudanese army leading the country could participate, or was it, because I've heard a lot of language also about people's governance? What was the political outcome people were working towards before this war and this rebuilding process?
You know, there were three major outcomes that the Sudanese people were hoping to get after that revolution. The first was peace, justice, and equality, and freedom. So Sudanese said that after this revolution, we will not go back to be governed by military, no matter who military is, whether RSF or SAF. So people said that we are going to have a complete civilian government, a complete civilian system and governance, and to have a national constitution that govern the people with the country, the civilians, and the militaries themselves. Because since 30 years ago, we were governed, or Sudan was governed under military. So people want to change that, and for the Sudanese people, will actually achieve that civilian governance even after this war. And I believe that because of the spirit of peace, justice, and freedom, I don't believe military will come back and govern the country once again. I know we are having a war right now, but whenever it ends, that's the decision by the people.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Shakoor. Now, one of the needs, as you've actually been describing here, one of the needs of the political transition that has been taking place in Sudan was to see the RSF adequately integrated into the national army. And it seems that it's been a failure to do this that has been part of the cause of the recent conflict. Yeah. Now, upon establishment in 2017, the RSF, you know this better than I do, known as the Janjaweed, was actually a government-backed militia. And moreover, the RSF have been leading with the narrative since the beginning of this war that it's fighting to restore a hijacked revolution, hijacked by the Sudanese armed forces, that is, and that the RSF wants to give power back to this, civilian-led the people, right? Now, how, in your view, how true is this? Is this really a matter of people's army versus a state military dictatorship?
It's not actually. Civilian people do not have any partnership, or they are not part of the fight between the paramilitary RSF and the Sudanese armed forces. Now, the problem of the people is that they are not happy with the fighting between the RSF and the army. They want, definitely each country should have a one national army. But if we look at how the RSF has come, the RSF has come from the army, because the RSF was part of the army, and it has been established by the army. It has been brought by the army. And after the RSF has become strong, now the army is claiming integrating it back. Now the people do not have problem with that, but the problem is between the army generals and the RSF generals, which they are not coming together to integrate. And even after this war, if this war has finished today, again tomorrow the Sudanese people will ask for one national army. That means this war should end this argument. After we come back from this war, we still want to see, or the Sudanese people still want to see, a national army that does not have any division, does not have two leadership. The idea of RSF being strong is not the people's mistake. This is the army itself mistake. So meaning that there is civilian people who are hoping to run a civilian democratic country, and there are armies, because Sudan has not only two armies, RSF and SAF. There are many other armies that we do not even talk about right now. So there will be a very big problem if we integrated the RSF into the army. What about the other armies? Right.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that Hemeti believes that he should be leading the Sudanese armed forces and is aiming for that as the outcome of this war? Or even if it's not the SAF that he leads, do you think that he believes he should lead whatever the national army is? And if that is the case, how do you see this being settled between the two?
Well, Hemeti is a potential general, and I believe naturally any person has a potential and has ambition to lead the institution where they are. You know, if you are just an employee in any kind of company, you would love to lead that company. Maybe it depends. So for Hemeti to have a potential to be leader of the army, I think that is a national right for everybody. That's what I'm saying. But there should be steps, there should be laws and regulations how Hemeti reached to the level of leading the country, leading the national army. Now we do not have a problem who to lead, but how to lead and how to reach there. Al-Burhan sees that Hemeti is overtaking and Hemeti is growing fast and Hemeti having potential to lead the country. Unlike Hemeti says that I am working to bring democracy back to the country. I'm working because Burhan is backing up the previous regime and sort of those things. So everybody will not tell you publicly that I would like to lead, but will work, and then you will see their goals and their ambitions to lead, in fact.
Yeah. What about the role of the international community, not just in trying to broker a ceasefire between the RSF and the Sudanese armed forces now in the last 7 weeks, but also their role in bringing the Sudanese armed forces into power? Do you think that they have done a good job so far in brokering, helping broker these agreements, or do you think that there have been weaknesses in the process? Just how do you view the role of the international community thus far in both of these peace processes, the one now and the one also before?
Now, you know, the international community has to work into, different angles of this situation. They have to work on civilians. We are talking about 1.5 or 6 people are displaced, affected by the war. We're talking about thousands of people killed and hundreds of thousands are injured today as we speak. Last night, yesterday, there were a lot of bombing. Now, the international community has to work on helping and assisting the civilians, saving their life, giving them assistance needs, and have to put pressure on the two warring parties to bring this war to an end in order for them to receive humanitarian aid. And the other major part that the international community should play is the what you're talking about, the mediation of the settling this, especially the negotiation that was taking place in Jeddah. The international community has to play a role in bringing this war to an end by mediating. But now all these efforts are coming to failure because the army announced withdrawing themselves from the or is no longer in the process. So the international community, I don't know what mechanism is working right now to bring those people together, those two generals together, but they couldn't bring them right now. America and Saudi Arabia is working very, very hard. There was an Eastern African initiative by Kenyan president, and Djibouti and the South Sudanese president. Also, we did not see any light for that. And the African Union, just 2-3 days ago, they had a lot of meetings on that. Also, we did not see any result. Now, I believe that the problem now is not the international community efforts. The problem is how those two generals are responding to the international community demands. Not only the international community, but rather the people. They are not listening to the people's stories. They did not know our story. They did not listen to how people are being affected. And if America and Saudi Arabia and other initiators are trying their level best to bring these people together, and they can't, I believe that they have to think by themselves to come back and sit together. Otherwise, the war will continue. Today, we are exceeding the 1 month and a half.
Yeah, thank you. The impacts of this war, Shakoor, regionally, how would you describe them? The instability now in Sudan, on the rest of East Africa, and even broader on the continents.
I believe that this war would actually affect the neighboring countries. It will affect Egypt. It will affect Libya, Chad, Central Africa Republic, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. And how does it affect? Because there will be, security chaos around this region. If there is one country is not stable, other countries will not be stable. And now, because the Sudanese government, the army are busy fighting in Khartoum for getting the borders. So if the borders are not secured, then it will be a very security threat to East and North Africa as well, not only East Africa, because we border 2 countries from North Africa and 1 country or 2 countries in Central Africa and 3 countries from East Africa. So all Sudan must be stable, because if Sudan is not stable, most of the countries in the eastern, north and east, north and Central Africa will be affected.
Thank you so much for that, Shakoor. Coming towards the conclusion of our discussion, according to a report quite a while ago, actually by Al Jazeera, this is November 2017, the RSF was originally established to actually quell a rebellion in the Darfur region of Sudan, during which, according to Human Rights Watch, and I quote here, a campaign of forcible displacement, murder, pillage and rape on hundreds of thousands of civilians was conducted. What was at the heart of the rebellion in Darfur at the time? And can you help us understand the political and or historical dynamics between the Darfur region and the greater Sudan?
Well, we know that Darfur is one of the great regions in the western Sudan, and we're not talking about the old history, but now Darfur is a prominent region of Sudan in the west, and since 2003 the war broke out in Darfur as a result of misconduct and marginalization and from the previous regime of al-Bashir. And when it comes to the RSF history in Darfur, we know that how the RSF was in Darfur were malicious by the previous regime. But what we are talking about right now, the RSF has been described as a rebel group against the government. But just 1 day, 2 days before the war, they were a legitimate part of the
army.
Of the army. And they said the army was begotten from the the RSF is begotten from the army, and it is just, the problem is not the RSF and the army. The problem is between Al-Burhan and Hemeti, because this issue, for me, this war is not Sudanese war. It's not the war between Darfur and Khartoum. It's a war between 2 people. It has been a personal problem. Everybody has potential. Al-Burhan sees that he has this historical and professional leadership of the army, which is his inherited from Bashir, and Hemeti sees himself, he is coming to save people's life, as he claims so. So in that case, the political dynamic in Sudan is very complicated, because there are 3 partners here, civilian partners, which is more than 70 political parties, and RSF itself. Now we consider as a political party, as well as the army, because the army involved in every political presence in the country since 30 years ago until right now. And in Darfur, honestly, yes, there are some people from the RSF who are doing, atrocities and everything. But when it comes to Darfur, there are a lot of groups who have weapons, who have arms, that they can actually attack people, they can actually kill people, and there are also armed robberies who can actually meet people on the street and and kill them. And there are so many reports right now coming out that the RSF has attacked a lot of people in Darfur. It could happen, but Al Jazeera needs to verify who is doing what exactly in Darfur.
These questions, though, I hear what you're saying, that this is really a war between 2 people, and that the description of the RSF now is not really matching who they were considered to be by the Sudanese people or the country, and also the international community. They were a legitimate part of the army until this war began. I'm hearing what you're saying, but what I want to understand is, what was this rebellion in Darfur? Why was it so important for the government to quell this rebellion that they developed an entire militia that is now what we know to be the RSF? What were the questions there?
RSF was not a rebellion. RSF...
No, I'm not saying it was a rebellion. I'm saying there was a rebellion in Darfur that the RSF was developed. What was the questions of the people in Darfur at that time?
At that time, the rebellions were not against RSF. The rebellions were against the army, against the Khartoum central government. When we're talking about Darfur rebellions, we're talking about Darfur liberation movements. Many Darfur liberation movements who armed themselves in Darfur and fighting against the government. Now, the term Janjaweed was used by al-Bashir recruiting people, militias, who were fighting for the sake of al-Bashir regime to resist the armed forces that call themselves rebel liberations in Darfur. So in that term, the people were looking at rebellions, were fighters for freedom, fighters. They want to help the country, Darfur. They want to bring Darfur right from the central government, and that's how they were looking at it. And I believe so many people were supporting the rebellions, or supporting the liberation movements in Darfur, because they believe that rights will come. And of course, over the last Juba peace agreement, we had a very good agreement that if it has been applied, we wouldn't have come to this level. So there was also rebellions, but now they are no longer rebellions, because they come back with an agreement that done in Juba, and they come back to build. They come back to see how they can cooperate with the people in order to build Darfur back and to bring the right back. The RSF, until the Juba peace agreement, was not part of the rebellion. It was part of the government. It was part of the national army.
Now, if you had the chance to talk to both leaders, both of these generals, both the RSF and the SAF, what would you tell them in terms of bringing this war to a close as soon as possible? And
I will tell them that you are telling lie first. Second, you are not fighting because of people. They are fighting because of themselves, and they are potentials, what they want to achieve. Because I believe that they did not hear or see the stories of the people today. They did not see how people are suffering today. If they do so, stop the war right now, and we as civilians, as Sudanese professionals, we can come and sit with them and tell them what we want and how we want this war to end. And we're ready to actually safeguard the country not to come back to war again. But now they don't want to listen. So I will tell them that stop this war. This is an insane war. It will lead them, and both of them, Burhan said, there is no victorious in this war. Not Hemeti, not Burhan. So who is the victorious right now in this war? We don't know who is behind the war right now. That means this war will only finish and kill the Sudanese people, not themselves. If today Burhan or Hemeti is dead, it's only one person. We're talking about more than 1 million people are affected, and they are subjected to die. So why they want to save themselves? 2 people forgetting above 40 million people in the country.
Powerfully said. Thank you so much for your time today, Shakoor. Deeply appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much for hosting, and I'm very happy that you are hosting, and I appreciate your talk. And also, I'm glad that your TV is actually concerned about the Sudanese issues, and we appreciate the fact that you are concerned and you are helping with information and everything. Thank you very much for the host.
You're most welcome. Our liberation is definitely connected.
Yes. Shukran.
Well, everybody, I hope that you found that informative and insightful, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. My name is Soreti Kadia, and I'm your host. You're watching OMN Insights.
Hawaasa Oromoo biyya Kaanaadaa magaalaa Toorontoo fi naannoo ishee jiraataniif OMN waxabajjii 17 bara 2023 Toorontootti waltajjii marii hawaasaa OMN Community Engagement qopheessuu wajjin beeksisuu gammachuu guddaadhaan. Guyyaa kanatti daayirektarri olaanaa OMN Dajanee Guutimaa fi Aadde Naadiyaa Abbaa Biyyaa keessummoota kabajaa ta'uun gidduu keessanitti argamu. Dhimma waloo uummata keenyaa fi gahee adda durummaa OMN akka miidiyaa Oromootti bahaa jiru akkaataa cimsuun danda'amu irrattis isin waliin mari'atu. Marree وتبجي كل أتربة بركم لما في دمي سدي ساعة كيوكان وان بيم رايقلي بيلم كيسن ولين هاتو ججا قويا كانت كامان ياجون ميديا كيسن كتمستن بريفيس همنا OM من تهو كيسن أكمل لفتن كبجا قدان سنة في الرجرام بكي والجهي هاي بارك اريا 4 تيسون كل سدي تربات ميسدي بلور ستريت ويست ONM 6R 2Z3 كندا بكي ياي فلن باركي قدا قدو قلب الشنن دايم منيو كيسة جمتوان تيف إجولي كيسن كبدا قطا قاما قلبي قوتن ولين دبل ساتن وديفنو دبلتا جمال كوبس بالبلاكين جافر توربا زيرو توكو أفر تميلم كل أفر يوكان جافر توربا فرشان صدمي لم توربا تميلمان كوريك انديسي تو سجنتجا كون نمودن ديسو OMN جافي قرر أمتا